Hi everybody, and thanks for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial. Instead of showing you one specific pattern, in this video I'm going to show you the fly tying technique or techniques to tie a CDC parachute fly. This is one of my go-to flies, especially whenever I'm fishing over fish that are keyed in on emergers. These are highly pressured fish and typically a smooth surface on the water. I go to the CDC parachute post because it just really has that insect, buggy looking proof of life that fly fishermen like me love, and we kind of hope that fish do too. So to tell you a little bit about this, or basically to show you a little bit more, I'm going to start with a dry fly hook in my vise. I have some 8/0 thread getting pretty close to the end of this spool. I'm going to start right by the eye of the hook and wrap back about 1/4, maybe a little less than 1/3 of the way, then wrap forward 2 times. Next, I'm going to place on my parachute post. The material I'm using is some parachute post wing from Hairline. The color is fluorescent chartreuse, and I love these fluorescent colors. They're just wonderful to see from really far away, and especially on small flies. I love this chartreuse and pink as well. A lot of my buddies make fun of me for fishing those pink flies, but I seem to do pretty good with them. I'm going to cut out a little piece of it like this. And if you take a look at this strip, it's really thick. It's too thick to just tie on right now, especially on a hook of a size 16 like I'm using. Instead, what I'm going to do is just separate this material in half. So I'm going to come up with 2 pieces of material that I'll be able to use for posts. Once I have that little section, it's about 2 inches long, I'm just going to put it on the other side of the side of the thread facing the camera, double it over itself, pull it straight down with the thread onto the hook. Just wrap a couple of times in front of it, once behind, and my parachute is locked in place. Now the parachute's there. However, for this post, I really need to have it so that there's a stem coming up that I can wrap my CDC around. Now there's some tools that are out there. I have a couple of them. They all work really well. In the event you don't have one, let me just explain a really quick way that you can create your parachute post. I'm just going to grab onto this material, just spin it a little bit into my right hand. With my left hand, I'm going to bring the thread around, drop it onto the other side, and then bring it around the post. Drop it down, and continue. I'm going to wrap it around approximately 6 to 10 times. It really just depends on how high up I need this base. Because I'm going to be wrapping with CDC, I really don't need it that high up. The one key that you really want to attempt to focus on is make sure each wrap going up is directly one above the previous wrap. Thus you'll create a nice foundation. Whenever you feel that you're just about there, I'll let it hang and then I just wrap it directly around the hook once. Now I have a strong foundation. If you want to verify it, you can actually just wrap it around. You'll see the post does not move too much. I'm just going to bring it back down to the thorax position. Now if I was tying a typical or a standard parachute fly, at this point I would just basically stroke the fibers forward, wrap back, tie in my tail, body, bring it back up to the thorax. At some point put on a little bit of dubbing, tie in a hackle, wrap the hackle around the parachute post, tie the hackle off directly behind the eye, do the same with the thread, and then I'd be ready to fish. I'm going to be using CDC instead. So really before I even show you anything about this CDC, think to yourself about why I'm using this in an emerger situation, how you can adapt your dry fly to that. Whenever a dry fly is emerging, it's going to look a little bit different. The body might be a different color. It's typically darker on the patterns that I use. For my tail, I won't be using microfibbits. Instead, I would have something that represents a trailing shuck. The thorax might represent the color of the natural as it's emerging out. And then the CDC that's going to go around is just going to be splayed in great formation to give it that nice insect buggy proof of life look. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this CDC. There's 4 types of CDC. This is type 1. It's got really long fibers. They don't all necessarily even out at the tip. They just go basically perpendicular from the stem. They seem to have a little bit more of that marabou look near the base, and they get a little thinner near the tip. I'm using a type 1 today, one just a little bit smaller than this feather. This is one I would use typically with a size 12 or a 14. Since I have a size 16 hook in, I'm just going to use a little smaller feather. Now this is a type 2 feather here. For type 2, it's a smaller feather. You can see all the fibers basically even out at the tip. This is similar to a type 3 feather, which is like called a CDC puff if you've seen them labeled in a fly shop before. Now this type 2 is great for a delta wing, whereas that puff feather could be used in lots of other applications. For instance, some tires will use them as the parachute post. Now there's also a type 4 feather. If you bought a pack of CDC at a fly shop and they were really low priced, more than likely they were type 4 feathers. They may not be as even or as long, they're typically a little shorter, but they have lots of applications as well. Now I'll put a link at the very bottom of this YouTube fly tying description on this page, and it will have a nice little article about the 4 different types of CDC and some applications for them. I forget which website I found it on, but it's a wonderful resource just to read. It's a quick read, and you'll understand a little bit more about CDC fibers as I did myself. So for our CDC parachute, there's a couple different ways that we can apply it. Now this is the feather I'm going to use today. I've seen some guys that will actually just tie it in by the tip and wrap it around the post of that parachute. I'm not going to tie it in that way. Instead, what I'm going to do is use a dubbing loop tool. So I have this really cool tool. This is from Stonfo. It's an Italian-based company. It's a neat tool for many reasons. Number one, it's got a nice weight to it. Number two, it spins just with excellent ball bearings. And number three, and most importantly, this is really the selling point on this tool, is that it rotates to the 90-degree position. I've used this tool at a couple of fly tying shows, and guys are really just drawn to it because it has so many neat functions. Well, I'm going to be using that 90-degree turn whenever I'm tying the CDC in on this post. To use a typical dubbing loop tool, I'm just going to extend my thread a little bit. I'm going to pull this underneath the thread. Whenever I pull it, we'll kind of tighten the tool. I don't have to worry about that, but instead I'm going to bring the thread back around, lock it in place with a couple wraps, place one behind my loop, and then the last one just in front of the post. Now I have almost a triangle. I'll try to pull this out so you can see. So I have a nice little triangle, and if I pull it towards myself, the triangle closes and tightens. I can actually push it in different instances to really make sure that those tips of this tool are really pushed against each other and they create a lot of tension with that thread. Now when I get back to my little CDC, let me see if I can find it on my bench here. When I have my feather, there's all kinds of different tools out there that you can use to separate these fibers from the stem. And I've used many of them. They're really great things, but I don't believe that they're needed. Instead, what I'm just going to recommend you do is hold this feather by the tips and then just stroke the fibers so that they're going perpendicular to the stem. Once you have one side perpendicular to the stem, you're going to stick that side directly in your dubbing loop and try to push it up as close to the hook as possible, then pull your dubbing loop tight. I might try to rotate this over so you can see what's going on. And there's probably the best look you're going to get. So you can see how I have these fibers. I'm going to try to get them in there so they're even about the halfway point, and this thread is really just locked against it. I'm going to take my scissors now and just cut straight up the stem. And when I do that, the stem's going to just drop, and it's going to leave those fibers locked in my dubbing loop. I'm going to do this one more time since I was moving it around to show you guys. So I have my feathers that are left, or the fibers that are left over. I'm just going to pull them up just a little bit more. I want to get them as close as possible. I'm going to spin this about 3 times. 1, 2, 3. As I rotate this around, you'll see I have those fibers just shooting out. Now it's at this point that I'm going to utilize this tool by making it that 90-degree bend, and then just start wrapping it around my parachute. When I have just about all the fibers there, I'm going to bring this tool back. It's on my side. I'm going to bring the thread towards me. I'm going to pull all these fibers back so I can just lock this parachute or this loop in place. So I'm going to stroke those back, let it hang, wrap that forward once, get one more wrap around it, then whenever I trim, because the thread's all going to be the same color, I just want to make sure I trim just my dubbing loop out of the way. Once I have that trimmed, I can then just stroke these back a little bit, finish off the head of my fly. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to lock it in with a quick half hitch so I can show you how the fly has turned out. Now I'm going to take this parachute post, pull it up, I'm going to turn it just so I can trim this. And then I'll show you a finished look at this fly. So here is my finished CDC parachute. I have my parachute right now, my post, that fluorescent chartreuse, going straight up. It's about the length that I would keep it before fishing. If at any point during the fishing that I think that length might be a little too high, just too tall, I can trim it away. You can see all my CDC fibers. They are just splaying out all over the place. There's just enough there to support this fly on the surface. It might drop just a little bit into that film, which is exactly where I want it. If you want a little bit more of that bushiness, you can just add a few more fibers and make sure you have all those fibers in there. The other nice thing about putting these CDC fibers in like that, if you have any of them that are too long, for instance, this one right here just seems to be a little too long, I can just take my scissors right now at this point, trim it down just a little bit. So I have that bugginess, I have that proof of life going on. It just really seems like this fly is going to just come to life right now. So this is a really easy technique. If you guys like CDC as much as me, hopefully you've seen this technique or you've at least considered it. It's a really simple technique. It's not a difficult one. You may have to just try it a few times to get used to using a dubbing loop and holding that dubbing loop tight to keep that CDC in there. But without a doubt, the biggest key is once you make that first cut with your scissors on that CDC, whichever fibers you cut at that point will be the remaining ones, and that feather will fall off because that stem's a little heavy. So keep that in mind. I'll just show you what my stem looks like right now. This is the one that I cut, and you can see all the ones that are below are the ones that are now on the fly. All these ones at the tip, though I had them locked in that thread, there wasn't enough pressure in that thread to keep all those fibers in there, thus this stem fell out. Now if you purchase one of those dubbing loop or those CDC tools, or if you just have a bulldog clip, you can hold all of these fibers in place and make sure you get them all. In my opinion, you don't need that. If you don't have that clip, you definitely don't need it. You can see I got more than enough CDC fibers there. There'll be more than enough to support this fly on the water. So with that said, I really do appreciate you viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial. If you don't have a dubbing loop tool, I really recommend this Roto Dubbing Elite. I believe you can find these on eBay. There's a few fly tying shops online that sell them, but it's made by Stonfo, S-T-O-N-F-O. So thanks go out to Stonfo for the use of this Roto Dubbing Elite. Check out some of these CDC, the types 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'll post that article on the very bottom of this description. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them directly on this YouTube page, or you can email me at tcammisa@gmail.com. Thanks everybody for viewing this YouTube fly tying tutorial on the CDC parachute technique.